Order! Order! We start with questions to the Secretary of State for Scotland, Richard Ford.
Number 1, please, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Firstly, an apology to you in the House for Scottish questions overshadowing other events today, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I was pleased to join the Commonwealth Games Federation last week to confirm Glasgow will host the Commonwealth Games in 2026. This will be yet another wonderful opportunity for Scotland to show how we can put on world-class sporting events. As part of those events, of course, I visited the Sir Chris Hoy Velodrome and spoke with the next generation of cyclists who have been inspired by Sir Chris himself. I'm sure the whole House would wish to pass on their best wishes to Sir Chris Hoy and his family. And finally, congratulations to the women's football team who qualified for the playoffs yesterday after a 4-0 win over Hungary. Mr. Speaker, I was delighted to join the Prime Minister as he hosted the inaugural Council of the Nations and Regions in Edinburgh at Queen Elizabeth House earlier this month. We discussed opportunities for attracting long-term inward investment, stabilising the UK economy and creating good jobs. The Council demonstrates our commitment to working together to delivering those priorities.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Alongside Scotland, it is essential that all of the UK's nations and regions have a seat at the Council of Nations and Regions. Yet areas like the Great South West, which is home to over 3 million people with an £80 billion economy, are being left out because we don't have metro mayors. Will he speak with colleagues in the Cabinet Office to ensure that Scotland can work as a council with all of the non-mayoral regions of England?
Mr. Speaker, on the 16th of July, the Deputy Prime Minister wrote to all areas that do not have a devolution deal to invite them to come forward with a proposal. New mayors established through this process would also be eligible to sit in the Council of Nations and Regions. I'll make sure the Deputy Prime Minister forwards a letter on to the honourable gentleman.
Chris Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's brilliant to welcome the Prime Minister to my constituency for the first meeting of the Council of the Nations and the Regions. Can the Secretary of State tell us if, after this Council, the Government is committed to ending the decade and a half of austerity imposed on my constituents by the Conservative and SNP governments?
Mr. Speaker, I was also delighted to attend the Council of the Nations and Regions in a Labour constituency in Edinburgh, and I can guarantee and assure the honourable gentleman that our manifesto said no return to austerity, and that's what we're determined to deliver.
Senate Secretary John Lamont.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Unite, the trade union, have issued a joint letter from political leaders across the United Kingdom's nations and regions opposing Labour's cut to the winter fuel payments. It's been signed by every party at Stormont and parties in Wales, and the Scottish Conservative leader Russell Finlay has also signed it. Was the winter fuel payment even discussed at the Council of Nations and Regions?
Mr. Speaker, I thought the Shadow Secretary of State would have taken the opportunity with a full House to apologise for his government not only crashing the economy but leaving a £22 billion black hole. It's something that this government is determined to clean up.
Order. We've not even got to the budget yet, Mr. Bully, and you're already excited. Come on, Secretary.
I would hope the Shadow Secretary of State may come to the dispatch box during the rest of his questions and apologise to the country for crashing the economy and apologise to pensioners for what's happened to them as a result.
Jamie Stone.
Number 2, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was delighted to speak at Spacecom Expo last month in Glasgow, where I met a wide range of industry members, both national and international. Recently, I was also fortunate to visit the Saxavord Spaceport in Shetland and saw wonderful progress there. I've also met representative Orbex in the honourable gentleman's own constituency. I'll continue to champion Scotland's spaceports, including in Sutherland, in his own constituency.
Jamie Stone.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Secretary of State for his answer. He mentions the company Orbex. At present, they employ 125 people. By 2030, they can employ as many as 500. Can I ask the Secretary of State if he'd be willing to visit Orbex in Elgin and indeed the Sutherland Space Launch Site?
Secretary of State.
Well, Elgin is certainly not the final frontier, Mr. Speaker, so I'll be very happy to visit. And of course, the Minister for Science recently visited the UK Space Agency's new office in Edinburgh, and during that visit he echoed my sentiments regarding the importance of Scotland's space sector. I know the Minister for Data Protection and Telecoms has recently met with Orbex as well, and I will remain in close contact with my ministerial colleagues to ensure that we back the sector, and I'm very happy to visit when ministerial time allows.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As the Secretary of State for Scotland, I think, knows I recently had the opportunity with the Scottish Affairs Committee to visit California to look at how they have created an environment which encourages development of new space projects. In Scotland, we have a unique opportunity, not least because of the developments in Glasgow, but because Edinburgh University is already well respected and indeed part of the programmes Stanford, NYU, Columbia and indeed NASA. So can the Secretary of State tell us what the government is going to do to encourage the creation of that sort of environment in Scotland? And will Edinburgh University, with its reputation, be central to it?
Well, Scotland will be central to the space sector, and I very much welcome the question. We will fully back the space sector, as I've already said to her honourable friend. We've been visiting the Minister of Science, has been to the new UK Space Agency's new office in Edinburgh. The Minister for Data Protection and Telecoms has met Orbex. I've met Orbex. I've been up in Shetland myself to Unst to visit the spaceport up there, so we'll fully back that. And of course, the potential is to infinity and beyond.
Kenneth Stevenson. Secretary of State.
Can I welcome my honourable friend to his place? A wonderful result in his constituency of Aberdeen Shotts. Investment into the UK to drive growth is the government's #1 priority. We have started delivery on that already. Just this month we hosted an international investment summit where we announced £63 billion of shovel-ready investment across the UK, which includes the likes of Greenvolt's £2.5 billion investment into Scotland and Iberdrola's £24 billion into green energy. We also announced this week that Glasgow will host the Commonwealth Games, bringing £100 million to the city itself.
Kenneth Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I thank the Secretary of State for his answer? It is refreshing to see a government working across departments to ensure our pro-worker, pro-business and pro-growth inward investment. Therefore, can I ask him to outline, after years of Scotland being let down by two poor governments, this new Labour government approach benefiting my constituents in Airdrie and Shotts?
The #1 benefit to his constituent Adrian Shotts, Mr. Speaker, will be to have the honourable gentleman as the local member who champions them. I'm pleased my honourable friends welcome to the approach. Adrian Shotts has a rich industrial heritage, of course. Our modern industrial strategy will reignite the industrial and technological potential that exists in all of our communities. The National Wealth Fund and GB Energy will help rebuild Scotland's industrial base. We want Scotland to be the most attractive part of the UK to invest in. We will continue to work closely with the Scottish Government to make that a reality. And I couldn't have put it better myself than the honourable gentleman. He said pro-worker, pro-business and pro-growth. That's this government.
Chris Law.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, earlier this year, the UK Conservative Government promised £20 million levelling up partnership for my city of Dundee for projects such as the university's Life Sciences Innovative District, new campus for Dundee Angus College and the Dundee Museum of Transport, amongst many other things. Yet, despite in the last 4 months writing 2 letters seeking assurances, have so far had non-committal and have raised lack of commitment and raised concerns of Labour are about to renege on its commitment. Can the Secretary of State today assure me that these are going to be committed and in full to Dundee, the £20 million?
Well, the honourable gentleman won't have to wait long. The budget will be in about an hour's time, Mr. Speaker, and the Chancellor will lay out all the spending plans when we go into that budget. But the biggest impact on his own constituency in Dundee, of course, is GB Energy and what that will do to our green energy system, which makes me very, very surprised why nobody from the SNP voted to back the bill last night, Mr. Speaker.
Graham Downey.
Number 4, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State has regular discussions with the Ministry of Defence on supporting Scotland's defence sector, which makes a vital contribution to both Scotland and the UK's growth and helps the UK remain safe against current and future threats. I know the Secretary of State was pleased to visit Babcock's site of the South Dockyard recently with my honourable friend, where he saw first-hand the fantastic work that they are doing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank my honourable friend for that reply and congratulate him on his debut at the dispatch box this morning. Earlier this month, as he mentioned, the Secretary of State joined me in visiting the South Dockyard in my constituency. Does he agree with me that the failure of the SNP to support the defence sector to recruit the highly skilled workers they need from within my constituency and the rest of Fife is a damning indictment of the SNP's commitment to the security and prosperity of the people of Scotland? And will he reassure me that he will do all he can to ensure the defence sector in Scotland contributes fully to the UK's security and future economic growth?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I know that my honourable friend has been a champion for the defence sector in his constituency since his election. I commend him for that work. I agree with him that if it's essential that, that any government engages with the defence sector, not just because of the jobs created across Scotland, but because of the vital technology that they are developing. There's a real opportunity to create and retain skilled work in Scotland, and it's something that all of us have a responsibility for promoting as much as possible. And I'm happy to reassure my honourable friend that the Secretary of State for Scotland and the Government will continue to champion the defence and manufacturing sectors in Scotland.
Yes, Fuller.
Question number 5, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Scotland Office is committed to championing Scottish arts and regularly showcases the sector's significant cultural and economic contributions to UK and Scottish Government ministers. In the budget later today, the Chancellor will set out her spending decisions. These will allow the Scottish Government to make its own spending decisions in devolved areas, including on arts funding.
Jess Fuller.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I was glad to hear the Secretary of State celebrate events in Scotland in his opening remarks. And Scotland and the UK in general boasts one of the world's leading arts industries, including the notable Edinburgh Fringe Festival. But it is facing funding pressures due to government cuts and increased Brexit red tape, which complicate travel to Europe. British artists are being shut out of European markets, hindering their ambitions and success. What steps is the Minister taking with other departments to ensure that a thriving arts sector is unimpeded by Brexit red tape?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I know that the Honourable Lady has a background in performing arts and brings her experience of that to this House, and I would agree with her. Scottish artists are world-renowned, and it's really important to them and to promoting Scottish culture around the world that they can perform internationally. We're supporting Scottish artists and continue to work to support our musicians to tour, and that's included the Government's successful Music Export Growth Scheme, the International Showcase Fund and the Department for Business and Trade's Internationalisation Fund, and we are engaging across Government with the EU and Member States on how best to improve arrangements for touring in Europe without a return to free movement.
Tracy Gilbert.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Since being elected, my honourable friend for Edinburgh East and Musselburgh secured the Westminster Hall debate on culture and economic contribution of Edinburgh festivals, the first debate on this matter since 1992. Does my honourable friend agree with me that this highlights the SNP government's shameful treatment of Scottish creative sector, and can he outline what this UK government will do to secure the future of the industry and support the Scottish thousands of writers, artists and performers?
Minister. Thank you, Mr Speaker. I welcome the honourable member's comments and also our comments about the member for Edinburgh East and Musselburgh, and I was pleased to attend his debate in Westminster Hall when these issues were discussed. The UK government has supported creative industries across Scotland, including in her own city, £8.6 million to the Edinburgh Festivals, £2 million of capital funding to the King's Theatre in Edinburgh, and across Scotland, £5 million of capital funding to the Borough Collection and millions more committed through the Falkirk and Grangemouth deal to the Falkirk Arts Centre, and we'll continue to support arts and culture across Scotland.
Christine Sullivan.
Question number 6, please, Mr Speaker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The crisis this government inherited from the previous government isn't just fiscal, but it's also industrial, because neither they nor the SNP had any proper industrial strategy for Scotland. Our industrial strategy will deliver certainty and stability. Businesses need that to be able to invest in the high-growth sectors which will drive long-term sustainable economic growth. Well-paid jobs at the heart of our modern industrial strategy, and this is complemented by our plan to make work pay. Our strategy is clear. We are pro-business and pro-worker as the government.
Christine Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The new industrial strategy identifies creative industries as a key sector for UK growth. My constituency of Bathgate and Linlithgow is a popular setting for film and TV productions, including the Lockerbie film Outlander, as well as hosting the Pyramid Studios. As film and TV makes an increasingly important contribution to my constituency's local economy, can the Secretary of State advise what steps the Government is taking to support investment into creative industries in my constituency?
Thank you for that question. The Honourable Lady herself mentions the Outlander, which was filmed in Bathgate and Linlithgow. She mentions the Lockerbie bombing film starring Colin Firth, and she also mentions the in-production thriller called Damage starring Samuel L. Jackson. I hope he did a few leaflets for the Honourable Lady while he was in the constituency. The creative industries are a jewel in Scotland and the UK's crown. The independent film tax credit that was announced earlier this week by my right honourable friend for culture, media and sport gives the distinct homegrown content and talent for films to meet the criteria for this new relief. Productions eligible for the tax break must have a UK writer or director or be certified as an official UK co-production. But what it does do, Mr Speaker, it shows this government is determined to back our creative industries and continue to grow our film and TV industries.
David Mundell.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does the Secretary of State share my anger and disappointment that the SNP Scottish Government continue to dogmatically block new nuclear development in Scotland, depriving my constituency of important jobs and economic prospects? And what can he do within the industrial strategy to make sure that we at least take advantage of decommissioning and supply chain opportunities?
Mr Speaker, I've never known the right honourable gentleman to be either angry or ever disappointed, but I share his anger and disappointment. This government backs our industry. Nuclear will be a major part of that energy mix going forward, and we need to make sure we have the right balance. GB Energy has been set up. It passed its third reading in this House yesterday. Disappointed the right honourable gentleman nor the SNP voted for it, but that's the vehicle which will take these issues forward.
Adam Jogi.
7, Mr Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Can I welcome the honourable gentleman to his place? The budget by my right honourable friend the Chancellor will be announcing shortly that will herald a new era of investment and growth in Scotland. In our first 100 days, we announced the headquarters of GB Energy in Aberdeen, launched the National Wealth Fund and announced the biggest upgrade of workers' rights in the generation.
Adam Jogi.
Mr Speaker, Newcastle and Lyme is home to many people who left Scotland to build a life like my constituent Lee Bernadette Walford. Can the Secretary of State outline how resetting the relationship between the UK and Scottish governments is important for economic growth up and down our United Kingdom?
I thank the member for that question. He is right. We don't agree with the Scottish Government on everything, or indeed very much at all, but Scots expect us to work together to produce results, and that is what we have tried to do. Yesterday I had my regular meeting with the Deputy First Minister, and this morning I spoke to the Finance Secretary ahead of the budget. Economic growth is a key area there, and I'm delighted to highlight shared work on energy, bringing the Commonwealth Games to Glasgow, the £100 million jointly funded package for the Falkirk and Rangers growth deal. Our long-term economic strategy requires both governments to work together. The Prime Minister and the First Minister have been clear that's what we're determined to do.
Pete Wishart.
Speaker, the Secretary of State boasted of a £150 million investment fund, only to bizarrely contradict himself and say that no such figure existed. Is this Scottish Schrodinger's funding? And is this perhaps the levelling up fund referred to by my honourable friend?
Secretary of State.
I'm very surprised that the honourable gentleman was keen to ask a question, given he didn't apply for one in the shuffle, neither did any SNP member. And it's also quite surprising that the honourable member, with all his experience in this House, wants to spend his time in this new Parliament defending the previous Tory government's reckless gambles with the economy.
Can I just say, I don't know whether you're standing or not.
No, the Chair of the Committee.
As the Chair of the Committee, who wanted to come in on this question?
Yes.
Patricia Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And would my right honourable friend agree with me that the Drumchapel Levelling Up Fund bid and the project that would fall from that would be a very good way to promote the economic and social growth of that area?
Secretary of State.
I thank my honourable friend for that question. She's been an absolutely doughty campaigner for the Drumchapel project. She won't have long to wait. The Chancellor will come to this dispatch box shortly and announce the budget, and I'm hopeful that all of these projects, including some of the anti-poverty projects that she's championed for years in her constituency, come to pass.
There's a man that stands. Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Minister, when it comes to promoting economic growth in Scotland, it's quite clear the best way to do that is within this great United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. So, Minister, to make that happen and convince my colleagues in front of me the best way forward, what's the Minister doing to make that happen?
Secretary of State.
The best way to keep the United Kingdom together is to make sure that this is a successful UK Labour government, and that's what we're determined to do. And may I just point the honourable gentleman to the row in front of him? They have 9 SNP MPs left. We have 37. That's how you protect the union.
Shadow Secretary of State John Lamont.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Secretary of State said at the weekend that the Labour budget will herald an era of growth for Scotland. But what's going to grow? Is it the tax burden on hard-working Scots? Is it the number of pensioners choosing between heating and eating because they haven't got the winter fuel payments? Or is it the number of Labour broken promises? Or will we get all three this afternoon?
Mr Speaker, a second opportunity this afternoon to apologise for the Conservative Party crashing the economy and the dreadful wasteful £22 billion black hole that they left us to inherit, that they hid from the Office for Budget Responsibility. So I'd ask the Shadow Secretary of State to reflect on that before he asks his questions. And of course, he won't have long to wait, Mr. Speaker. The Chancellor will be here shortly.
Shadow Secretary of State, John Lamont.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's no answers in that response. Not so long ago, the Secretary of State said national insurance rise would have an enormous impact on businesses. And listen to this. He said under Labour, national insurance wouldn't go up. Tax rises, economic damage, broken promises. Isn't this Labour government just the same as the SNP?
Mr. Speaker, I thought the Shadow Secretary of State was just describing his own previous government.
Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend will know that the House recently supported the Employment Rights Bill at second reading, which the party opposite shamefully opposes. This is the biggest upgrade to workers' rights in a generation. The Government is taking a joined-up and collaborative approach to the delivery of the Make Work Pay Plan, which has been developed with businesses and trade unions. We are committed to continuing this approach through consultation on the implementation of Make Work Pay to ensure that the changes we are making work well for both employees and businesses.
I'm sure the whole House will join me in congratulating the member for High Peak on the birth of his daughter, Connie. And as he enjoys his paternity leave, I'm sure the Minister will be familiar with the Dad Shift campaign, which seeks to increase paternity leave for more fathers. We wondered, would he support that campaign so that more fathers, in addition to those tens of thousands the government have already opened up paternity leave to, can enjoy that? And wouldn't he agree it's a huge contrast with the party opposite, who are spending their time talking about getting rid of maternity leave?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, I do agree with what the honourable gentleman just said. I also said our congratulations to the member for High Peak on the birth of his daughter. This is why we are making immediate changes to paternity leave through the Employment Rights Bill. We're making paternity leave available from day one in a new job, and enabling paternity leave to be taken after shared parental leave. And I want to just pay tribute to my honourable friend for campaigning vigorously on this issue. And I'm sure, like me, he was delighted to vote for the biggest upgrade to workers' rights in a generation, which the party opposite shamefully opposes.
John Cooper.
Mr. Speaker, thanks. One of the criticisms of the new employment legislation being brought in is that it delivers us into the hands of trade union barons. Does the Secretary of State agree that we are indeed in the iron grip of the barons, since he was unable to attend an event in his own office last night because he wouldn't cross a picket line?
Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, we will take no lessons from the party opposite when it comes to employment rights, Mr. Speaker. Absolutely no lessons. This is a party that has left us with a £22 billion black hole in the public finances, which we are having to pick up, and which my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, will address in a moment.
Stephen Gittins.
I'll join the member from East Renfrewshire in congratulating the member on the birth of his daughter. And in terms of the demographic challenge, just before the election, the Scottish Labour Deputy Leader said there is something we can do to incentivise more people to come to Scotland. So in terms of employment in Scotland, has the Secretary of State and colleagues sat down with the Home Office in terms of encouraging more migration?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Government will work closely with the Migration Advisory Committee, and we welcome the contribution that migrants play to the economy. We will take no lessons from a party that has consistently said that the positive destinations for people in Scotland is a 0 hours contract, and who sat last night on their hands when we dealt with the GB Energy Bill.
Stephen Gittins.
Let me try and challenge the member in a spirit of collegiality. They have committed to working with the Scottish Government. Now, the member for Nahealan Indian Yar, who is in his place, has talked about when it comes to migration policy, no one size fits all, and it shouldn't be beyond us to devise ways to attract more people to work and settle here. So will he, from those benches, commit in what they've done that the Scottish and UK governments should work together, and will he commit to a meeting between both those governments so we can take forward more migration to Scotland in the way they committed to and we committed to and business is crying out for?
Mr. Speaker, we have committed to Scottish representation on the Migration Advisory Committee, which would go a long way in order to deal with these issues, but it's also for the Scottish Government to do things like build houses in areas where we need more migration in order to encourage people, in order funds and encourage people to come to live in Scotland?
Gregory Campbell.
Fine, Mr Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Mr Speaker, Scotland is lightly proud of its 6 World Heritage Sites. As my honourable friend will appreciate, responsibility for planning decisions for large-scale energy projects in Scotland rests with the Scottish Government ministers. The UK Government works closely with the Scottish Government to deliver for Scotland while respecting devolution. I meet regularly with my Scottish Government counterparts on these issues.
Gregory Campbell.
Thank the Minister. 23 years now. I thank the Secretary of State for his reply. In any discussions he will have, would he take account of the fact that, number one, I have written to UNESCO about the potential of a huge offshore wind farm very close to the Giant's Causeway and the UNESCO World Heritage Site that exists there. And the Communities Minister in Northern Ireland has also met UNESCO. Will he make representations to ensure that all considerations are given account of, to ensure that people know the potential compromise and problems that may exist to that World Heritage Site there?
Secretary of State.
Mr Speaker, I'm glad the member for East Londonderry hasn't lost any of his popularity in the House. It would be inappropriate for me to comment on planning decisions for large-scale energy projects in Scotland. This is a devolved responsibility. I do, of course, recognise the importance of considering the protection of local assets when developing renewable projects, particularly our cherished World Heritage Site.
That completes question.